At precisely 9 o'clock hours on February 26, 1945, Private First Class Douglas Jacobson crouched low behind jagged volcanic rock formations on Hill 382's western slope. Ahead of him, a two-man bazooka team absorbed devastating fire from a Japanese 20mm anti-aircraft cannon. Jacobson was 19 years old. 3 Pacific Island campaigns behind him. Not a single decoration earned. The Japanese had transformed Hill 382 into a fortress. 16 hardened defensive positions, each constructed to generate interlocking fields of fire that would slaughter Marines in overlapping kill zones. Jacobson had joined the Marine Corps Reserve at 17, falsifying his age documentation to enter combat service. Back in Port Washington, New York, he'd worked as a draftsman in his father's firm. Summers were spent as a lifeguard on Long Island's beaches. Now he belonged to Company Y, 3rd Battalion, 23rd Marines, 4th Marine Division, pinned down on the most heavily fortified elevation across Iwo Jima's entire volcanic landscape. The island measured 8 square miles of volcanic ash and systematic death. 5 days earlier, 30,000 Marines had stormed these black sand beaches, anticipating minimal resistance. Intelligence assessments had been catastrophically incorrect. Japanese Commander Lieutenant General Tadamichi Kuribayashi had invested 8 months converting Iwo Jima into an underground fortress. 18 kilometers of interconnected tunnels, concrete pillboxes, concealed artillery batteries, and Hill 382, the highest elevation north of Mount Suribachi, anchored his entire defensive network. Marines designated this sector the meat grinder. The nomenclature wasn't metaphorical. During the 7 days following the initial landing, the 23rd Marines had hemorrhaged nearly half their combat strength. Company after company had attempted seizing Hill 382. Every assault concluded identically. Japanese gun crews waited until Marines crossed open terrain, then unleashed devastating fire from positions the preliminary naval bombardment had failed to eliminate. Sherman tanks burned. Flamethrower teams died before reaching their designated targets. Entire rifle squads vanished into volcanic ash. Hill 382 rose 125 feet above the black volcanic beaches. Japanese engineers had carved the summit into an intricate maze of interconnected bunkers and fortified fighting positions. 57mm anti-tank guns commanded every conceivable approach vector. Machine gun nests covered the flanking terrain. Light tanks sat buried in volcanic crevices, invisible until they opened fire. And at the hill's base, a 20mm anti-aircraft gun swept the killing ground with methodical, devastating effect. Jacobson observed the two-man bazooka team advancing forward. The ammunition bearer carried 4 M6A3 rockets, secured in canvas webbing. The gunner gripped the launcher itself, a steel tube measuring 4.5 feet, weighing 13 pounds. They advanced 15 yards. The anti-aircraft gun erupted. Both Marines dropped instantly. The bazooka tumbled into ash. Company I was immobilized. Without neutralizing that anti-aircraft position, the entire assault would collapse. The company had already absorbed 17 killed and 26 wounded during the attack's first 30 minutes. Japanese defenders remained invisible. Every rock formation could conceal a rifle pit. Every depression could hide a machine gun nest. Marines were dying without ever observing the enemy. Jacobson stared at the bazooka lying exposed in open ground. The weapon was engineered for two-man operation, one to aim and trigger, one to load rockets and connect electrical ignition wiring. Nobody operated bazookas solo. The back blast alone could injure an isolated gunner. The weight made single-operator use nearly impossible, and reloading under fire demanded two-man coordination. But those two men were dead. If you're curious how Jacobson's decision played out, please engage that like button. It enables us to distribute these forgotten narratives to broader audiences. Subscribe if you haven't already. Now, back to Jacobson. The anti-aircraft gun discharged another burst. 3 additional Marines collapsed. Company I had been engaging Hill 382 for over 60 minutes. The Japanese positions appeared impenetrable. Higher command was monitoring this sector. Failure here meant failure across the entire 4th Marine Division's front. And beyond Hill, 382 lay the amphitheater, Turkey Knob, and the ruins of Minami Village, all bristling with enemy weapons. Jacobson gripped his rifle and moved toward the abandoned bazooka. The volcanic ash provided zero cover. Japanese riflemen maintained clear sight lines. One Marine had already attempted recovering the weapon. He'd covered 5 yards before a sniper located him. Jacobson continued advancing. He reached the bazooka, secured it. 4 rockets remained in the dead loader's canvas bag. He slung the webbing across his shoulder and lifted the launcher tube. 13 pounds of steel. 4 rockets at 11 pounds each. 67 pounds total. And he had to run. The anti-aircraft gun tracked his movement. Jacobson sprinted. The anti-aircraft gun fired. Rounds tore through air inches from his skull. He dove behind shattered rock formations 30 yards from the Japanese position. Volcanic dust coated his uniform. The bazooka tube radiated heat from morning sun exposure. He'd never fired a bazooka alone. Training emphasized strict protocols. Gunner assumes position. Loader inserts rocket from rear. Loader connects ignition wire to contact spring. Loader taps gunner's helmet. Gunner verifies backblast area is clear. Gunner fires. The procedure required coordination between 2 trained operators working in precise sequence. Jacobson had no loader. He positioned the launcher tube on ground, extracted one M6A3 rocket from canvas webbing. The rocket measured 19 inches long. Its shaped charge warhead contained 1.66 pounds of high explosive. 6 stabilizing fins folded against the body. He inserted the rocket into the tube's rear until it locked. Then he pulled the coiled wire from the rocket's tail assembly and wrapped it around the contact spring mounted on the launcher. His hands moved rapidly. The Japanese gun crew knew someone was behind those rocks. They were adjusting aim. Jacobson lifted the launcher onto his shoulder. Weight pulled him off balance. He braced his left hand beneath the tube. Right hand gripped the wooden stock and trigger mechanism. The latter's sight displayed graduations for 100, 200, 300, and 400 yards. He estimated the anti-aircraft gun at 80 yards. The tube's rear was open. When he fired, backblast would erupt behind him in a cone of superheated gases extending 15 meters. Anyone standing there would be incinerated. But nobody stood behind him. He was alone. He rose from cover, sighted, pulled the trigger. The electrical circuit closed. The rocket motor ignited inside the tube. The M6A3 shot forward at 80 meters per second. Fire and smoke erupted from both ends of the launcher. Recoil was minimal, but blast concussion hammered his ears. The rocket crossed 80 yards in 1 second. It struck the anti-aircraft gun's shield dead center. The shaped charge detonated. A jet of molten copper penetrated steel at 6,000 meters per second. The warhead exploded. The gun and its 4-man crew disintegrated in orange flame. Company I began advancing forward. Jacobson dropped flat. reloaded. He worked the process backwards, alone, without assistance, pulled the second rocket from the bag, inserted it from rear, connected wire, lifted tube. The entire reload consumed 40 seconds. A trained two-man team could accomplish it in 12. Two Japanese machine gun positions opened fire from higher on the slope. They'd been waiting for Marines to advance. Now they cut down 3 men in the initial burst. Company I went to ground again. Jacobson observed the muzzle flashes. Both guns were dug into earth-covered emplacements 70 yards uphill. The positions were invisible from frontal approaches. Only their firing revealed locations. He moved right, flanking the first position. Volcanic rock provided partial cover. The machine gun tracked other targets, suppressing the main Marine advance. Jacobson reached a position 40 yards from the emplacement. He could observe the barrel now, traversing left and right. He shouldered the bazooka, aimed, fired. The rocket impacted the earth covering and penetrated before detonating. The machine gun and its crew vanished in the explosion. Dirt and debris rained down the slope. The second machine gun swung toward him. Jacobson was already moving. He dove behind a ground depression as bullets shredded the space where he'd been standing. His ears rang from the bazooka's backblast. He had 2 rockets remaining. The second machine gun was now hunting him specifically. He crawled 20 yards left. The gun crew attempted locating him. They fired bursts at suspected positions. Jacobson waited until they paused to reload. Then he stood, shouldered the launcher. The machine gun crew spotted him. They swung the barrel. Jacobson fired first. The rocket struck the gun mount. The explosion was smaller this time, but effective. The machine gun fell silent. Jacobson observed 1 Japanese soldier crawl from wreckage, wounded. A Marine rifleman from Company Y shot him. 3 targets neutralized, 13 to go. But now Jacobson confronted a bigger problem. Ahead, blocking the route to the summit, stood a reinforced blockhouse constructed from concrete and volcanic rock. Artillery had failed to destroy it. Inside were at least a dozen Japanese defenders with rifles and grenades. He had 1 rocket left. The blockhouse sat 50 yards uphill. Its walls measured 3 feet of reinforced concrete faced with volcanic rock. The structure measured roughly 12 by 15 feet. A single firing slit faced downslope, covering the approach with interlocking fields of fire from the machine gun positions Jacobson had just destroyed. American naval gunfire had struck this blockhouse repeatedly during pre-invasion bombardment. 16-inch shells from battleships, 8-inch rounds from cruisers. The structure displayed scorch marks and concrete chips, but walls still stood, and inside, Japanese defenders waited with rifles ready. Jacobson had 1 M6A3 rocket. The shaped charge could penetrate armor, but concrete was different. The warhead would blow a hole in the wall. Whether that hole would be sufficiently large to neutralize the position was uncertain. He needed a different solution. He moved laterally across the slope, staying low. The blockhouse firing slit faced southwest, covering the main Marine avenue of approach. If he could reach the northern side, he might locate a blind spot. The Japanese had constructed their defenses assuming attackers would approach from the beach. They hadn't anticipated a lone Marine flanking their positions from within their own defensive perimeter. Jacobson crawled 40 yards through volcanic ash and shattered rock. His uniform was black with dust. The bazooka tube scraped against stone behind him. Company I remained pinned down, absorbing sporadic fire from other positions higher on Hill 382. He reached the blockhouse's northern face. No firing slits on this side. The structure had been built into the hillside, using natural slope for additional protection. But the rear entrance was visible. A low opening barely 3 feet high, covered by wooden framing. Jacobson set down the bazooka. He still had the one loaded rocket, but firing it into the entrance from 10 feet away would be suicide. The backblast in confined space would kill him as surely as it would kill the Japanese inside. He needed the rocket for something else. He pulled a fragmentation grenade from his belt. Then he retrieved the bazooka again and moved to within 15 feet of the entrance. He could hear voices inside. Japanese. At least 6 men. Maybe more. He shouldered the launcher, aimed at the wooden entrance frame, fired. The rocket impacted the frame and detonated. The explosion blew the entrance open, collapsing part of the rear wall. Dust and smoke poured from the opening. Jacobson dropped the bazooka tube and pulled the pin on his grenade. He counted 2 seconds, then threw it through the smoking entrance. The grenade detonated inside the blockhouse. Screams, then silence. Jacobson waited. Nothing moved. He circled to the firing slit, looked inside. The interior was devastated. Bodies, rubble. The position was neutralized. 4 targets down, 12 to go. But now he had no rockets. The bazooka was useless without ammunition. He picked up his rifle and started back down the slope toward Company Y's position. As he moved, he passed the bodies of the original bazooka team. The loader's canvas bag was still there. Jacobson checked it. Empty. He looked across the volcanic ash field. 200 yards back, near where Company I had initiated the assault, he could observe the supply point. Ammunition crates, medical supplies, and boxes of bazooka rockets stacked behind a low sandbag wall. The entire area was under Japanese observation from higher positions. Mortar fire had been falling there intermittently all morning. 3 Marines had already been killed attempting to bring ammunition forward. Jacobson started moving toward the supply point. He stayed low, using every depression and rock cluster for cover. Japanese snipers were active. 1 round cracked past his head. Another impacted ground 2 feet to his left. He reached the supply point, located a crate marked M6A3 rockets, pulled it open. 12 rockets inside, packed in individual cardboard tubes. He grabbed 4, shoving them into the canvas bag he'd taken from the dead loader. A mortar round hit 30 yards away. Shrapnel whined overhead. Jacobson ran back toward the slope, carrying the bazooka tube in one hand and the bag of rockets in the other. Company I was still pinned down. Higher on Hill 382, a second pillbox had opened fire. This one was smaller than the blockhouse, but equally deadly. 5-man crew, heavy machine gun, and a perfect position covering the eastern approach. Jacobson loaded a fresh rocket. The pillbox was 90 yards uphill. He found cover behind a rock cluster and began his approach. The Japanese inside had witnessed him destroy the blockhouse. They knew what was coming. The pillbox crew opened fire early. Too early. Jacobson was still 80 yards out when the first burst kicked up volcanic ash 10 feet to his right. They were nervous. The blockhouse destruction had rattled them. Nervous defenders made mistakes. Jacobson zigzagged uphill using terrain. The pillbox machine gun tracked him, but the gunner was firing short bursts, attempting to conserve ammunition. Each burst gave Jacobson 3 seconds to move before the next one came. He covered 15 yards, then 20. The gun fell silent, reloading. He dove behind a depression and shouldered the bazooka. The pillbox was now 65 yards away. He could observe the concrete structure partially buried in volcanic rock. The firing slit was narrow, designed to minimize exposure while maintaining a wide field of fire. But narrow slits created a problem for defenders: limited traverse. The machine gun could only swing so far left or right before hitting the concrete edges of the opening. Jacobson moved right, forcing the gun crew to adjust their position. The barrel swung to track him. He continued moving. The barrel reached its maximum traverse. The firing stopped. The crew was repositioning the gun mount inside the pillbox. Jacobson stopped moving. Aimed. Fired. The rocket crossed the distance in under a second. It entered the firing slit and detonated inside the pillbox. The shaped charge warhead, designed to penetrate armor inside a confined concrete space, the effect was catastrophic. The explosion blew out through every opening. Fire and smoke erupted from the entrance. The machine gun went silent. Jacobson waited. Nothing moved inside. He reloaded and moved forward cautiously. At 20 yards, he could see into the entrance. The 5-man crew was dead. The interior was destroyed. Spent brass from the machine gun covered the floor. 5 targets down. 11 to go. Company I was advancing again. Jacobson could observe Marines moving up the slope in small groups, using the positions he'd cleared as cover points. They were making progress. But ahead, the terrain deteriorated. Hill 382's western face was a maze of volcanic rock formations, shattered terrain, and interconnected defensive positions. The Japanese had spent months preparing these defenses. Every approach was covered. Every avenue of advance channeled attackers into kill zones. Jacobson moved higher. 50 yards ahead, he spotted an earth-covered rifle emplacement. Not a pillbox, not a bunker. Just a hole in ground with overhead cover made from logs and volcanic rock. 2 Japanese riflemen inside, firing at advancing Marines below. The emplacement was crude, but effective. Artillery bombardment had failed to destroy it because earth covering absorbed blast. Direct fire couldn't reach it because of angle. And the riflemen inside had excellent visibility across the entire western slope. Jacobson flanked left. The rifle emplacement was positioned to cover downslope targets. The defenders weren't watching their flanks. He reached the position 40 yards away, slightly above the emplacement. He loaded a rocket, aimed downward at the overhead cover, fired. The rocket hit the logs and earth covering, penetrated, detonated inside. The emplacement collapsed. The firing stopped. 6 targets down. 10 to go. But now Jacobson faced the most dangerous section of Hill 382. Ahead, forming a semicircular defensive perimeter around the summit approach, sat 6 interconnected positions, each one supporting the others. Rifle pits, machine gun nests, mortar positions, all carefully sited to create overlapping fields of fire. The Japanese had designed this cluster as the final killing ground. Even if attackers broke through lower defenses, this perimeter would stop them. The 23rd Marines had attempted assaulting this position twice already. Both attempts had failed with heavy casualties. Jacobson had 3 rockets left, 6 targets. The mathematics were simple. He would run out of ammunition before he ran out of positions. He needed to return for more rockets. The supply point was now 300 yards behind him. The entire route was exposed to Japanese observation from the summit. Mortar crews had zeroed in on the most obvious paths. Snipers covered open ground, and the Japanese defenders in the 6-position cluster had certainly observed him by now. They would be waiting for his return. Jacobson started moving downhill. He stayed in depression lines, avoiding ridges. A mortar round hit 50 yards to his left. Then another. Closer. The Japanese were bracketing him. The next round would find range. He sprinted the last 100 yards to the supply point, grabbed another 4 rockets. A mortar round impacted 20 yards away. Shrapnel screamed overhead. He threw himself flat as a second round hit even closer. Then he ran back uphill, carrying 67 pounds of weapons and ammunition, while Japanese mortars walked across the slope attempting to kill him. Jacobson reached the cluster of 6 positions at 10:30. He'd been fighting for 90 minutes. His uniform was soaked with sweat, despite cool February air. His ears rang from the bazooka's repeated backblast. His shoulder was bruised from launcher recoil. He had 4 rockets, 6 targets. He would need to make choices. The 6 positions formed a defensive arc, roughly 60 yards across. The Japanese had built them to support each other. If he attacked the leftmost position, the others would have clear shots at him. If he attacked from center, all 6 could engage simultaneously. The positions were spaced 15 to 20 yards apart, close enough for defenders to provide mutual support, but far enough that a single rocket couldn't destroy multiple emplacements. Jacobson studied the layout. The rightmost position was a rifle pit. 2 men. The second was a machine gun nest, partially concealed behind volcanic rock. The third and fourth were mortar positions. The fifth was another rifle pit. The sixth was a reinforced observation post with clear view of the entire western slope. He made his decision. Take the observation post first. Without spotters, the other positions would be fighting blind. He moved wide right, circling outside the defensive perimeter. The route took him through broken ground studded with sharp volcanic rock that tore at his uniform. Japanese defenders in the positions were focused downslope, watching for the main Marine advance. They weren't expecting an attack from their flank. Jacobson reached a position 70 yards from the observation post. He loaded a rocket, shouldered the launcher, fired. The rocket hit the observation post's reinforced wall and detonated. The explosion collapsed one side of the structure. Jacobson reloaded immediately, fired a second rocket into the smoking ruins. The observation post disintegrated. 2 Japanese soldiers stumbled out wounded. Marine riflemen from Company Y, now advancing up the slope, shot both. Jacobson didn't wait to observe the result. He was already moving toward the next position, the rifle pit. 2 Japanese soldiers with Arisaka rifles. They'd seen the observation post explode. They were scanning flanks, attempting to locate the threat. Jacobson was 40 yards away when one of them spotted him. The soldier raised his rifle. Jacobson dove behind cover as the shot cracked past. He had 2 rockets left, 5 targets remaining. He couldn't waste ammunition on a 2-man rifle pit. He pulled a fragmentation grenade from his belt, waited 3 seconds, then stood and threw. The grenade arced through air and dropped into the rifle pit. The explosion killed both defenders. 4 rockets expended, 2 grenades used. 8 positions destroyed. 8 to go. The remaining 4 positions in the cluster opened fire. Machine gun rounds tore through air around Jacobson. Mortar crews were adjusting aim. He could hear the distinctive thump of rounds leaving tubes. He had maybe 10 seconds before they landed. He ran left, away from his last position. The mortars hit where he'd been. Shrapnel whined through air. He kept moving, found cover behind a low ridge of volcanic rock. The machine gun in the second position was tracking him. Short bursts. Disciplined fire. The gunner was skilled. Jacobson couldn't move without exposing himself to that gun. He loaded his third to last rocket. The machine gun nest was 50 yards away, built into a natural depression in the slope. Good cover. Good fields of fire. Difficult target. Jacobson waited for the machine gun to fire, counted the burst. 5 rounds. The gunner was conserving ammunition. During the pause, Jacobson rose, aimed, fired. The rocket hit the depression edge and detonated. The machine gun went silent. Jacobson didn't know if he'd destroyed the position or just suppressed it. He reloaded. A Japanese soldier appeared from the smoking position, running toward the next rifle pit. Jacobson shot him with his M1 Garand. The soldier fell. 2 rockets left. 3 positions remaining in the cluster. 2 mortar pits and 1 rifle pit. The mortar crews were the priority. They were dropping rounds on Company Y, preventing Marines from advancing. Jacobson moved uphill, angling toward the first mortar position, 60 yards away. The crew was reloading. They hadn't seen him yet. He shouldered the bazooka, aimed, fired. The rocket hit the mortar pit dead center. The explosion was massive. The mortar tube launched into air, tumbling end over end, before crashing back to Earth 30 yards away. 2 Japanese soldiers died instantly. A third crawled from wreckage, his uniform on fire. 1 rocket left. 2 positions remaining. Jacobson reloaded his final M6A3. The second mortar position was 40 yards uphill. The rifle pit was between him and the mortar. 3 Japanese soldiers in the rifle pit. 2 in the mortar position. 5 men. 1 rocket. He made a choice. Jacobson aimed at the mortar position, fired his last rocket. The M6A3 hit the mortar pit and detonated. The 2-man crew died instantly. The mortar tube flipped backward from blast, its base plate torn from ground. 12 positions destroyed. The rifle pit remained. 3 Japanese soldiers in the pit saw Jacobson. They opened fire with their Arisaka rifles. Rounds snapped past his head. He dropped the empty bazooka tube and unslung his M1 Garand. 8 rounds in the clip. 3 targets at 40 yards. He fired. The first soldier dropped. Fired again. The second soldier fell back into the pit. The third soldier attempted to climb out and run. Jacobson shot him in the back. The 6-position cluster was destroyed. 13 enemy positions neutralized since 9 a.m. The road to Hill 382's summit was open. Company I began advancing past the positions Jacobson had cleared. Marines moved in small groups, weapons ready, expecting more resistance. But the Japanese defensive line had broken. The positions Jacobson destroyed had been the anchor points. Without them, remaining defenders higher on the hill were isolated. Jacobson looked downslope. To his left, across a shallow ravine, another Marine company was pinned down. He could observe Marines crouched behind rocks, unable to move. They were absorbing heavy fire from a position Jacobson couldn't see from his angle. The company was part of the 24th Marines, attached to support the 23rd's assault. They'd been attempting to advance up the eastern approach to Hill 382 while Company Y attacked from the west. But something had stopped them. The entire company was stuck 200 yards from the summit. Jacobson had no more bazooka rockets, but he could observe what was holding up the advance. A pillbox, concrete and volcanic rock built into the hillside overlooking the eastern approach. The firing slit faced directly down the ravine, creating a killing field no Marine could cross. He picked up the empty bazooka tube, started moving downslope toward the supply point again. His legs ached. His shoulder throbbed from the launcher's repeated recoil. He'd been fighting for nearly 2 hours without water. The supply point had moved forward. Marines had dragged ammunition crates up the slope as Company Y advanced. Jacobson found the new position behind a rock cluster 70 yards downhill. More M6A3 rockets. He loaded 4 into the canvas bag. Then he moved across the ravine toward the pinned-down company. The route took him through exposed ground. Japanese snipers were still active. One round hit volcanic ash 2 feet to his right. Another cracked overhead. He reached the Marine Company's position. A captain observed him approaching with the bazooka and pointed uphill toward the pillbox. Jacobson nodded. He'd already identified the target. Jacobson moved right, working his way up the ravine's edge. The pillbox crew was focused on Marines directly below them. They were firing methodical bursts from what sounded like a Type 92 heavy machine gun. 7.7 millimeters. 600 rounds per minute. Effective range 800 meters. At this distance, the gun was devastating. Jacobson climbed higher, using dead ground to mask his movement. The pillbox crew couldn't depress their gun low enough to engage targets directly beneath their position. He exploited that blind spot, moving through terrain they couldn't cover. He reached a position 50 yards from the pillbox, slightly below its level. He loaded a rocket. The angle was difficult. Firing upward reduced the rocket's effective range and accuracy. But the pillbox slit was visible, 3 feet wide, 18 inches tall. If he could place a rocket through that opening, the shaped charge would detonate inside. He aimed, compensated for the upward angle, fired. The rocket climbed, hit the concrete wall 2 feet above the slit, detonated. Chunks of concrete rained down, but the pillbox was intact. The machine gun kept firing. Jacobson reloaded, adjusted his aim downward, fired again. The second rocket entered the firing slit and detonated inside the pillbox. Fire and smoke erupted from every opening. The machine gun fell silent. The position was destroyed. 14 positions down. 2 to go. The Marine Company below began advancing. They moved quickly, exploiting the silence from the pillbox. Within minutes, they'd crossed the ravine and were climbing toward the summit. But Jacobson heard something that stopped him. A different sound. Mechanical grinding. The distinctive noise of an engine. Tracks on volcanic rock. A Japanese tank was moving up from the eastern base of Hill 382. The tank was a Type 95 Hago, light tank, 7 tons, diesel engine, 37mm main gun, 2 Type 97 machine guns, crew of 3. The Japanese had been using these tanks as mobile pillboxes on Iwo Jima, positioning them in crevices and depressions where American naval gunfire couldn't reach them. This one was moving up the eastern slope, grinding through volcanic ash at 8 kilometers per hour. Its turret traversed left and right, searching for targets. The tank commander had spotted the Marine advance and was moving to intercept. Jacobson watched from 70 yards away. The tank was below him, working its way up a shallow draw that led toward the summit. Behind the tank, he could observe the Marine Company he'd just helped. They were advancing in the open, unaware of the threat. The tank stopped. The turret swung toward the Marines. The 37mm gun elevated. Jacobson loaded a rocket. The Type 95's armor was thin, 14mm on the front, 12mm on the sides, 6mm on top. The M6A3's shaped charge could penetrate up to 100mm of steel. The tank was vulnerable from any angle. But tanks were dangerous targets, even light tanks. The Hago had a crew trained to operate under fire, and if Jacobson missed, the tank would turn its guns on him. He aimed at the turret. The Japanese tank commander was visible through the open hatch, scanning for targets. Jacobson fired. The rocket hit the turret's left side and detonated. The shaped charge penetrated the thin armor and exploded inside. The turret mechanism jammed. Smoke poured from the hatch. The tank's engine kept running, but the gun could no longer traverse. The tank was damaged, but not destroyed. The hull machine guns were still operational. One of them opened fire, spraying rounds across the slope. Marines dove for cover. Jacobson reloaded. The tank was attempting to reverse, backing down the draw to escape. The driver couldn't see Jacobson's position. The damaged turret blocked his view upslope. Jacobson moved left, flanking the tank. He reached a position 60 yards away with a clear shot at the tank's rear. The engine compartment. The thinnest armor. 6 millimeters. He aimed. Fired. The rocket hit the engine deck and penetrated. The explosion was immediate. The diesel fuel ignited. Fire erupted from the engine compartment and spread into the crew compartment through the damaged turret. 2 Japanese crewmen bailed out, their uniforms burning. Marine riflemen shot both. The tank burned. Black smoke rose into the morning sky. 15 positions destroyed. 1 to go. Jacobson had 1 rocket left. He looked uphill toward the summit of Hill 382. The final Japanese position was visible now, a large blockhouse, bigger than the others. Concrete walls, multiple firing slits. The structure dominated the summit approach. This was the last strong point. If he could destroy it, Hill 382 would fall. He started climbing. The slope was steep. Volcanic ash gave way under his boots. He was exhausted. 2 hours of continuous combat. 67 pounds of equipment. No water, no rest. Behind him, Company Y and the attached Marines from the 24th were advancing together. They'd linked up at the ravine. Combined strength, maybe 80 men, enough to take the summit once the last blockhouse was neutralized. Jacobson reached a position 40 yards from the blockhouse. He could observe Japanese soldiers moving inside through the firing slits. At least 6 men, maybe more. They had rifles, grenades, and they knew he was coming. The blockhouse had been built to withstand naval bombardment. Its walls were 4 feet thick, reinforced concrete mixed with volcanic rock. The roof was covered with additional layers of earth and stone. A direct hit from a battleship's 16-inch gun had failed to destroy it. Jacobson had 1 rocket. He studied the structure. The firing slits were narrow, too narrow to guarantee a rocket would enter. If he missed, the rocket would detonate against the exterior wall. The explosion might damage the structure, but wouldn't neutralize it, and the Japanese inside would kill him before he could reload. He needed a different approach. Jacobson moved right, circling toward the blockhouse's rear. The route took him through exposed ground. Japanese soldiers inside could observe him through the firing slits. They opened fire. Rifle rounds cracked past his head. He dove behind a rock cluster. From this angle, he could observe the blockhouse entrance. A reinforced door, steel frame, wooden panels. The door faced away from the main American advance. The Japanese hadn't expected anyone to reach this side of their defenses. Jacobson loaded his final rocket, aimed at the door, fired. The rocket hit the steel frame and detonated. The door blew inward. The explosion collapsed part of the entrance structure. Smoke and dust poured out. Jacobson dropped the bazooka tube, drew his M1 Garand, pulled 2 grenades from his belt, and charged the smoking entrance. Jacobson threw the first grenade through the shattered entrance. The explosion echoed inside the blockhouse. He threw the second grenade. Another detonation. Then he entered, rifle ready. The interior was chaos. Smoke, debris, bodies. Japanese soldiers wounded from the grenade blasts. Jacobson fired, worked through the blockhouse room by room. The fighting was close, brutal, hand-to-hand in some corners. His M1 Garand ran empty. He drew his pistol, kept moving. Within 2 minutes, the blockhouse was silent. 16 enemy positions destroyed. 75 Japanese defenders killed. 30 minutes of continuous action from 9 a.m. to 9:30 a.m. Then another 90 minutes clearing the remaining positions up the slope. Private First Class Douglas Jacobson, 19 years old, had broken the Japanese defensive line on Hill 382. Behind him, Company Y reached the summit. Marines poured through the gap Jacobson had created. By noon, the 23rd Marines held the high ground. By 1300 hours, they'd begun clearing the reverse slope. Hill 382, the anchor of the entire Japanese defensive system on Iwo Jima, had fallen. The cost had been severe. Company I had lost 43 men killed or wounded. The 23rd Marines as a whole suffered 50% casualties since landing on February 19th. But Hill 382 was American ground now. Jacobson walked down the slope at 1400 hours. His uniform was torn. His face was black with volcanic dust and powder residue. He carried the empty bazooka tube in one hand. A Navy corpsman checked him for wounds. Minor cuts, bruises, severe dehydration. No serious injuries. Someone asked him how he'd done it. Jacobson said he didn't know. He'd had one thing in mind: getting off that hill. The battle for Iwo Jima continued for 3 more weeks. The island wasn't declared secured until March 16th. 6,821 Marines died. 17,000 were wounded. Of the 21,000 Japanese defenders, only 216 surrendered. 27 Marines and sailors earned the Medal of Honor at Iwo Jima, more than any other single battle in American history. Douglas Jacobson was promoted to corporal in April 1945. He returned to the United States in September and reported to Headquarters Marine Corps in Washington. On October 5, 1945, President Harry Truman presented him with the Medal of Honor during a ceremony at the White House. Jacqueline Lucas, the youngest Medal of Honor recipient from Iwo Jima, received his medal the same day. Jacobson was discharged in December 1945. He re-enlisted in April 1946, attended officer candidate school at Quantico, commissioned as a second lieutenant in March 1954, served in Japan, Okinawa, China, Vietnam. Before retiring, his commanding officer informed him he was the only officer in the Marine Corps without a high school diploma. Jacobson took the GED exam, passed, received his diploma in 1967, then retired as a major after 24 years of service. He moved to New Jersey, worked as a real estate agent, married a teacher he'd met in Okinawa, moved to Florida in 1987. Rarely spoke about the war unless someone asked. Douglas Jacobson died on August 20th, 2000, in Port Charlotte, Florida. Congestive heart failure and pneumonia. He was 74 years old. He is buried in Arlington National Cemetery. The state of Florida named a veterans nursing home after him. The Douglas T. Jacobson State Veterans Nursing Home in Port Charlotte stands today, caring for veterans who followed the same path he walked. 16 positions, 75 enemies, 30 minutes, 1 Marine, 1 bazooka meant for 2 men. Hill 382 fell because Douglas Jacobson refused to stop. If this story moved you the way it moved us, do me a favor. Hit that like button. Every single like tells YouTube to show this story to more people. Hit subscribe and turn on notifications. We're rescuing forgotten stories from dusty archives every single day. Stories about Marines who saved their companies with weapons designed for two men. Real people. Real heroism. Drop a comment right now and tell us where you're watching from. Are you watching from the United States, United Kingdom, Canada, Australia? Our community stretches across the entire world. You're not just a viewer, you're part of keeping these memories alive. Tell us your location. Tell us if someone in your family served. Just let us know you're here. Thank you for watching, and thank you for making sure Douglas Jacobson doesn't disappear into silence. These men deserve to be remembered, and you're helping make that happen.